So we have our contours drawn, and I want to talk about shading. The first and foremost, the most important thing about shading to create a realistic rendition of a portrait is how you apply it. It doesn't matter, but if you apply your values like so, they will be liney. Our skin tone is not liney. We might have wrinkles, laugh lines, imperfections, freckles, but if we apply our graphite like this, you will not achieve a realistic look. So, when you apply your graphite, I want to remind you, first of all, let me see if I can get this to focus on my pencil. You want to create an angle on your pencil lead. Okay, I don't know if you can see it there against the white of my phone, but you want to create that angle, and that flat part of the lead is what you want to touch the paper when you're shading, when you're adding value. So now I am Caucasian, so even though my skin would be considered white, my skin is not as white as the paper, so I do have to add values. And I'm also going to start to soften my contour lines a little bit. I don't want really, really dark outlines that flattens everything, so I'm going to lose form that way. So what I can do first is start to go in with kind of a very light value, and I'm just using a mechanical pencil. You can use a variety of pencil thicknesses if you want to. I typically do all of my portraits in mechanical pencil, and I just vary the pressure that I'm working in. And sometimes I flip my lead, so I'm working on my sharp side of my lead depending on the type of line work that I need. But I'm looking at the shadows. I'm looking at the different highlight shapes. I'm using my eraser to go in to highlight anything that needs highlighted. But I'm going to put this very light value on all of my skin tone because that gives us a good base to then go darker with and to highlight and pull away from. I'm barely touching the paper. It's kind of this gliding effect. And then we'll talk about the eyebrow later. You could basically put the whole skin tone underneath or over that eyebrow shape. We have to come in over top of it with other values and textures, but that's for another video. Okay, so you can take that value up. The crease tends to be pretty precise and dramatic, so you can go fairly dark there, but again, you just have to look at your subject matter. And then, okay, the eyeball itself. The eyeball typically is lighter than the skin tone, but again, it is not pure white. You have to remember there is a sphere under there. There's a ball. So what I would typically suggest is to start off with the pupil. But before you fill in the pupil, okay, because it's dark, so we know we can go dark there. It's like a safe place. But I would look at the highlight shapes in the eye. There's a lot of highlights reflecting in my eye that almost distract from what's happening in the detail and texture, so I might make fewer of those. But let's say I might incorporate like this highlight right here, and maybe a little bit of this one right here. So I'm going to fill in and go super dark in everything but those highlight shapes that or I should say the entire pupil, except for those highlight shapes I just mapped out. And then the iris itself, I have kind of like medium blue green eyes, so my value is going to be a medium gray. And everyone loves to do eyes in color because everyone's eyes are so individual, so unique. They're so amazing. But for this sake, we're sticking in graphite. And here you've got to be careful that you don't accidentally change the shape of the iris. It's really easy to do, where you kind of think, oh, I need to go a little wider here and clean up this area here. Well, you've got to remember it has to be this full circle really underneath. So be very, very careful. And then I have some like brown and gold areas, so I'm going to go a little darker where those are by creating some kind of radial texture and line work, and it's a little bit darker on the outer edges. So I'm going to pull in some darker values. Again, I'm just pressing a little harder and using the sharper part of my pencil. And then I might say, okay, well, my pupil doesn't feel dark enough, so I can go and make it a little bit darker. Or maybe I feel like now I need to pull up some lighter areas in the eye. And usually, okay, because of the nature of the form of our eye, usually there's more of a highlight area on the bottom of the iris. Than there is on the top. So I kind of erased a little bit there, and then I'm bringing some of that texture back in, and I can crisp up that edge. I have a nice, clean, dark edge on my eye, my iris. I'm gonna round that out. Now just that space right there, I've started to push my value range a lot. This is really shaky, I'm sorry. But now the eyeball is not finished. The eyeball is not pure white at all. So we had studied drawing the teeth before, and we talked about how the teeth are not pure white and that the upper lip casts a shadow onto the teeth. Well, the upper lid here casts a shadow onto the eyeball as well. And then we have to think about how we shade a sphere. Okay, we've got to give it a little bit of shading and roundness. Now this might then allow me to go darker in the skin a little bit, so I can start to create some dimension. Might need to go a little bit darker in the tear duct fleshy area to give it a little bit more dimension. So I'm constantly adjusting my values and pushing that light skin tone that I originally applied. Okay, I'd say for the most part, we're okay. So now the most important part here, many students forget. They forget this thickness of the lower lid right here. Okay, so I have shaded over it completely, and I typically do this because I like to come in and erase it with my eraser. I like to go right up along the edge to erase and pull it up. I'm making a video. FYI. Hi, honey. So now with that pulled up, it starts to create a little bit more thickness. And I can start to go in and add a little bit darker values if I need to, or look at the corner here. And that brings the eyeball so much more into dimension. And then, of course, there's more to it with the eyelashes and the eyebrows. So I'm going to stop here and then give you some more direction on how to create the eyelashes and eyebrows. Just clean this up a little bit.